Welcome everybody to the Key to Games podcast here on Game Wisdom, where it's in the art and science of games. We have another design chat lined up for you for our show this week, and joining me, my co-host, the developer working on the game Samurai Pig, with a pig in that background there, Joshua Reyes.
Yeah, I have the pig background here to celebrate. We're getting really close to releasing the game, so I just wanted to have it as a nice background to remind everyone to wishlist Samurai Pig.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure we'll be doing a store page review at some point, so we hopefully won't be too mean to Josh when that happens.
I'm fine. I can take it.
But for our topic this week, we're going to be talking about monetization and how it relates to that quote from the Unity CEO, John Riccitiello, I think his name is?
Yes, John Riccitiello.
Who made a lovely little post last week saying that if you're a developer who doesn't think about monetization from day one, you're an effing idiot.
Yeah.
And that didn't spark any controversy or flack.
No. This is way over. I'm surprised we're even talking about it, honestly. How it...
Mm-hmm. And it reminds me a little bit of when John... what was his name? His name, one from Spireweb, Jeff Vogue. There we go. Jeff Vogue he also got in trouble when he was talking about how so many people were just wasting their time on games. They could be doing better stuff, more productive stuff, and a lot of people, especially on the artistic side, obviously gave him flack for that. And this is definitely one of those discussions where we talk about kind of that intersection between the art and business when it comes to video games and game dev. And from his quote, he is obviously focusing 100% on the business side. That, if you're trying to build a game and you're not thinking day one how to get money from it, then you're obviously a sucker. And I know for a lot of developers, especially for our audience being, a lot of indie developers, you're not necessarily thinking about retiring to a private island day one when you're building your game.
Right. I find this is like some kind of perfect example about, it encapsulates a ton of things and we can extract a lot from it. Business wise, how you might do PR, various things like that. But underneath it all, Riccitiello and then the other guy, Mark Whitten, said most of the points they said are correct, right? Like whether they said it this way or that, it's kind of true, right? Or 100% true, right? Like if you are making a game, there's, I guess, two ways to do it, right? You can make your passion project. That's fine if you can afford to do it, right? I can afford to make my passion project, no problem. Otherwise, you should probably be making the gig something that people will buy, right? Making games that people will buy, right? So that would go through like marketing research and things like that. I'll start with this quote right here from Mark Whitten first. Like, I want to extract some things from this little debacle so that way we can see how we can apply it to ourselves, because this is a much larger scale. But if we really bring it down, it applies to us too. So one of the things he says is, Mark Whitten said, the challenge is no longer do I have an interesting idea, and more do I have an idea that can raise above the noise and find the right customers and players, right? So like we've said many times, having a good game and having a great everything does not mean success, and it's been this way for quite a while now. I think the last time that could have been possible would have been like in the Flash game era, possibly, or something like that, Josh. I don't know. We'd really have to look back. But one of the, okay, if you are looking to make a game, and we're not private islanding, we're just trying to make a living and just comfortably put food on the table and continue doing it as something we enjoy and do. And so you got to be aware of these things first. And one of the things is, how am I going to make money with my game, right? And that is the most important fact there, right? Just bar one. That's bar one. Is that you know what I mean? So.
And that was something I talked about in my upcoming book, which is now less than a month away. So everyone to pre-order 5 copies of it for me, please.
The free to play?
Yep.
Okay, yes, definitely, and that's good that this fits in right here because there's a little bit of free to play stuff that's going to
Yeah.
pop up. But yeah, order 5 copies of Josh's book.
And
Get
buy
some
pre-order 5 times Samurai Pig.
Samurai Pig, correct, and then
Hmm.
you will receive shining pearls of wisdom.
Hmm. Do you get a coupon for a Pizza Hut coupon like in the Turtles game?
Yes,
There
yes.
we go. Now, when it comes to monetization, like you said, like he's not 100% wrong when it comes to this discussion. And one of the things I talk about in the book, especially when it comes to basically ethical monetization, is that at the end of the day, as a developer, you need to have money coming in. Like that's just the facts of life. If you build a game and you spend 5 years of your life on and you charge $0.00, I hope you weren't, mortgaging your house on that single title. And there are developers out there who do not think about monetization, even in the most barest of bare examples.
Like
I
zero,
I
zero.
told that story when Ken and I, Ken, my friend, and who designed the site, were at an IGA meeting, and there were a bunch of like students and college people going, you know what? I don't care if anyone pirates my game. I just want people to play it. And we both kind of sat there as our souls left our bodies, hearing that discussion. And the problem is, and like what Josh was saying, is that it's not so much about wanting to retire off, buy an island, get your 5 mansions, is the goal. The goal is earn enough money so you can make your next game, and then your game after that. And to have that plan, whether you are making a free to play or a retail game, is how is this game going to earn money? And I mean, that question, we can certainly take it in a number of different ways, which I'm sure we will in our
Yes,
episode.
yes, definitely. Um, so, you got some, Josh? Go ahead.
No, I'm just coughing.
Okay. Right. So one of the things you mentioned though, like real quick, I'm just going to crack into it. As you said something about marketing, is that okay? So you need to be thinking about how your game's going to be making money. I just wanted to pop in this marketing idea real quick.
Hmm.
Is that one of the things is that if you're making a game, right, you're making it for certain people to play. You're not just going to make something and say, "Oh, I hope people are going to play this." That's not going to happen. Like that is not you need to be deciding, okay, making a game that will sell, right? And that might sound evil or bad,
Hmm.
right? But that's actually sound practice. You can make a good game that sells well, that makes money, and it's not evil. It's totally possible, right? It's like, so you have to be thinking about like old style marketing would be like you get the game and then you hand it over to the marketing team. Now, what you have to do is you have to be ready and thinking how you're being marketing, who you're marketing to from the start, right? Who,
Yeah,
what,
exactly. And it's that same thing about who are you designing this game for?
yeah, who are
Is
you making
this
it for?
is this a action game? Is it a strategy game, a deck builder, visual novel, whatever? Because that is going to infer onto every one of your choices. Not just from a marketing standpoint, but from a design point. If I'm building a visual novel game and I say, you know what, let's throw in a 10-minute hack and slash section, well, is that something that my audience wants to play? This is the same thing that we talk about with the adventure game genre and some of the challenges that has had in terms of evolving and iterating. You can only take a genre so far out of the norm before you start to kind of lose the intended audience. And if you remember from our talk last week about genre mixing,
Yep.
that when you're building a game out of multiple genres, you are kind of making niches out of niches. And sometimes you can, blow up. You can have a game like Stardew Valley or something like a Disco Elysium. But again, it's not something that can just happen every single time. And you need to be smart about where you take from. And again, it's very simple. Where's the money going to come from? And like
Right.
we said, like in a free to play game, we'll probably expand on that later on in this discussion. But from a retail game, you need to be thinking, okay, what's my intended audience? How much should I charge for? And that one question, every single developer has probably asked at least a few dozen times with whatever their
Yeah.
project is.
Yeah, and probably got it wrong too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because a price point now, for example, Vampire Survivors, wow, that with that price point, kind of like um, Billy have the like that quality of a game, and you can't in an impulse buy price that like the game just hit it perfect like that. So yeah, like you need to be okay. What is my competition? Not competition, my genre, right? What kind of a game am I looking at? What do they usually pay for this type of game? What features are in that game? Do I have those features? Is it up to that quality? And so that might be way. Do a lot of market research on games in your genre and what you're aiming for your market and what they usually pay. And join the community if you can and see what you can extract from out of that. And from there, you should be able to get a price point for your game, right? And then, of
Mm-hmm.
course, we'll get into like scope and time. I mean, that might be a separate, different discussion, but all those other things will affect that, right? Like how would if you, for example, we're going to do instead of a free to play game. How would you scope out your microtransactions? I know we have a wonderful member right now who is working on a game with microtransactions in it, and he's balancing it right now. Yeah, that's definitely something that's
Mm-hmm.
requires a ton of work.
Yeah. Hey, Joe, thanks for stopping by.
Hey,
Yep.
Joe.
Yep, and Vampire Survivors, as both you and Rats are talking about, is a very unusual example when we discuss this kind of monetization. It was a game released at, what was it, $2.99 when
Yeah,
it came out. That is something that, when we look for like all intents and purposes, is not something we see from an indie developer today. We've been talking about games being priced higher. 14.99 to maybe 24.99 being kind of like the min and max, but even that is variable. And I heard that the developer of Vampire Survivors like had like an experience with like free to play and gambling design, so they obviously understand these pools. And here's, as you said, when it comes to researching other games or researching other genres or other games in the genre, it's not about direct competition. That if someone plays my deck builder, they're not going to play your deck builder. But it's about understanding not just the pricing, but what are the conventions people expect. It would be like building a car and not looking at any other car models and just assuming, oh well, the brakes are in the back seat, the steering wheel is on the floor, pedals are just like randomly placed around. Yes, you're making a car, but you're not making something that is competitive. And I think, just like as we said, like if marketing is considered an evil term, I think thinking about competition is another thing that a lot of indie developers don't like. Again, the indie scene is a band of brothers and sisters.
yeah.
So
There's literally no competition with us. We're
yeah,
brothers and sisters. Yes.
and that makes it very hard to stop and say, well, this person's working on this. How do I make something better for my game and earn more money than they did?
Right. Exactly. That is definitely conundrum.
And with the Vampire Survivors example, the other thing that that game did was it also set a precedent about how much someone should charge for it. And that becomes, from a marketing and a monetization standpoint, even harder. Because
Yeah.
yep.
Go ahead. I think that's like one of the what it really did. It just flipped everything on its head about pricing. Because
Mm-hmm.
I've seen so much coming from that, like the an impulse purchase, right? Like is $14.99 an impulse purchase or is $3 an impulse
Yeah.
purchase, right? It's like if everybody's talking about, and even if it's not that good, you only spent $3. So and then the sales just skyrocketed because people were like $3, $3, $3, no problem. And when you come against, you're like, well, $14.99, and you might get less. So yeah, really kind of even threw the pricing more on its head. It just like I've been kind of little spiraling out of that, wondering, where it's going to settle from there.
Mm-hmm. And it also makes it that much harder to say, well, we want to make a higher quality version
Right?
of this. Can I charge $9.99, $14.99, $30 for a game like that? And in a lot of cases, the answer is no. Because even if you make a better version, like we've said before, you're not the first. The first game sets that standard of pricing, and everyone else has to meet and compete at that level. But again, when you're trying to figure out how much to sell your game for, it is a very tough thing because you can look at other games, but as I'm sure everyone here is well aware of, every game development is different. You can say that this game took 2 years to make, this game took 8 years to make, and so on. That, and there's another point: the consumer doesn't care. The consumer does not care how long your game took to make,
how hard you worked,
how much it costs you to make it. They care about, again, what that price tag is and what other people are saying about it. And I guess here's a question for you and for the chat. It does feel that consumers are willing to spend more for quality in today's market than they were like 3 to 4 years ago, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely. It seems like they will like $30, $40, like they'll definitely will seems like almost we can kind of get consumers will pay almost anything for a game. It just depends on how well it's marketed, I believe. You know what I mean? Before, I know like there'd be no way I would never buy that game for $30, and now many $30 games that I'm seeing sold would have never sold at that price point years back, right? So it's definitely changed in so many ways. I feel like now it's kind of slightly improving. The race to the bottom's kind of gone a little bit. What do you think about that, Josh?
Yeah, I think that has moved away, thankfully.
Yeah.
And I think part of that, I think, really has been just the higher quality of indie games we've seen over the past 4 to 5 years.
It's the resurgence of indie games being able to, to be able to justify the price for that type of game, and people willing to pay for that game and the quality and experience. You know what I mean? Because again, indie games offer something so unique, and we're so versatile. We can do so many things and nimble and change. So yeah, we can experiment, do all kind of cool stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at games like Hades, The Outer Wilds, Celeste, Disco Elysium, and so on, like, these games blew up. They met and beat, in a lot of cases, the AAA contemporaries of that year. And,
for sure.
And they did price at $19, $24, $30.
Yeah.
And I think people are seeing that if a game is $30, it could be worth it. It could have that unique experience. I know everyone's been talking about that game Stray that came out. That's priced at $30 as well.
I thought, $30 for Stray, yeah, and it's blowing up. Everybody, I think it broke some records on Steam for most concurrent players. I'm not sure. Maybe chat can enlighten me on that. But yeah.
And I do have to do that rant about the whole wholesome games push that maybe in a future piece there. But when you're trying to figure out what your game is worth, again, for some developers, and I think this gets back at that, the line between art and business. Some developers wait probably until the very end of their development and then go, okay, is this $14.99? Is this $20.99? What is the price of this game? Well, if we talk about purely from a business standpoint, they're probably thinking about that, when they're pitching the game to investors. Exactly, how much we're expecting to get out of this game, how much it's going to be worth. And I would say both extremes have their problems. If we look at the AAA side, it's led to a lot of games feeling very homogenized. That, the whole UPen open world or UPen design. I know a lot of people have criticized Sony for how, cookie cutter a lot of their marquee franchises have become. And then we look at it from the other side, we see games that just feel like a jumbled mess of mechanics, and sometimes they may work out, but for a lot of the times, these games maybe get 30 reviews, 10 reviews, 5 reviews, and like we've said before, marketing is not evil. At its basic level, your job as a developer, as someone who's running a studio or your company, be it a 1-person, 100-person, whatever, is that the game has to earn money. And you have to do everything that you can in order to get enough money, once again, to fund your next game, to then fund your next title. And like we've said, like one of like the best examples of this is Jake Burkett's GDC talk. How to survive in the industry without
11 years. A hit for 11 years. Amazing. Watch that if you haven't seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, I try to watch that like once or twice a year just to keep But yeah, like I think we're almost reaching a point in marketing where I know a lot of people, the devs are more introverted, stuff like that. I don't want to handle it. You can get someone else, meet people around. But the thing is that marketing is not an evil term anymore because where we're at in game development, it's like marketing is finding out kind of who's going to buy your game. Who am I making this game for? And yes, good.
And I was gonna say, like some people don't like to answer that question. They feel that it's stifling the artistic process. It's getting in the way.
Yeah.
But again, if you don't answer that question, how are you making money?
Right. And if you answer, "Oh, everybody's going to play my game,"
that got a laugh out of me there.
Right. Who's your target audience? Everyone.
It's just that simple. Well, if everyone buys my game, then I don't have to worry about money. And yet, like, you have to be able to answer this question because, again, all this becomes a factor of your game's development. You need to think about who your market is because that's how you're going to design your game. And how you design your game, again, is how you're going to market it.
Right.
And we've seen developers who, if you can't answer that question early, like we talk about when it comes to selling what your core gameplay loop is, it's going to just lead to all these additional issues. If your game is halfway done and you still don't know what your game's about or who you're marketing it to, that's not good.
Yeah, that's not good. And again, that was like it's like an old style. They mentioned that in the article where there was like the marketing team wouldn't even like talk to the game developer. Like the game would just get done and get handed off to the marketing team, and the marketing team would figure out how to sell this product, right, that they got. And I think somehow as we've gotten into this industry, we started to think that that's how it's done, but it's not done like that anymore, Josh.
No, it isn't. I mean, if you look at some of the more successful indie developers and publishers, people like New Blood Interactive, Kit Fox Games, Clay, and so on, like, they really do a lot with their marketing. All three studios couldn't be, further apart in terms of how they market their games, but that's the point. If your studio brand, if your game brand is like this is how you market your game. If it's like this is how you market your game like that. And you can't just copy someone else's marketing, and it's just like how you can't just copy someone else's game and expect everything to happen the same way.
But also there's a positive, what you just said right there, how they each market, there's so much room. Like we were just saying, there's no competition. This is a brotherhood, and there's so many different brotherhood, sisterhood. There's so many different ways that you can market the game. Kit Fox is marketing completely different from Clay, right? And so there's so many ways that you can come at this and look at marketing your game, right? And again, it's no longer an evil thing. Chris up there said that I'm not marketing. I'm bringing enjoyment directly to people. Like it maybe old style marketing, right, was evil where you're trying to lie to get people in the game. Now we're trying to find our market audience, find our target audience, and explain the game to them. Get it in front of our audience, right? So.
And I wanted to go to this what Rat's Tail said about I almost feel too ashamed to ask for money. Because it's something that we hear from a lot of indie developers, especially when you're starting out.
Yeah.
And I think what Shark said when we were having this discussion like a few years ago, I think is still rings true. That we're not asking for millions and billions and zillions of dollars. We're asking for money to live. It's like needing oxygen.
Right.
And this is what the role of making money for your game is. If you go into your first game thinking, if this game doesn't buy me a new house and it's a failure, that's not good. But at the end of the day, you should be earning money to live off of. You should be able to make a game and have it pay for itself. And if it, and I think again, like this is another aspect that we've discussed before about what is a successful game, because this is another major aspect of this. For some
Yeah.
people, a successful game simply means the game is done.
Right.
From a AAA studio, a successful game means it earns, a minimum 5 million copies
$1 million,
sold
yeah.
within the first month. Which every indie developer listening to us just got like a chest pain, as I said.
Right, right. They're like, I only sold 13 copies.
Mm-hmm. And your goal, ultimately, I think the bare minimum goal for your game, again, it has to break even. Like, even if, everyone loves your game and, all the reviews you get are positive, if it doesn't at least break even,
Yeah.
then I don't think I want to consider that a success.
Right.
And this is, again, like when we talk about like Jake Burgett's speech and what people like Jeff Vogue and Cliff Harris have talked about, that you need to be able to work with what you have. You need to be able to create a game within your scope, within your budget, that allows you to keep making games.
Right.
Because if that one game you worked on that, yes, everybody loved it, but now you literally have no more money to make another game, well, then that game you enjoy so much is your swan song. That's it. You're never going to make another game. And we've unfortunately seen this from a lot of indie developers who release a really good game or a very interesting title, and then they have no more money, and they're out.
Yeah, like actually, during my game right now, Samurai Pigs development, we lost some funding, so we're having to reallocate and change some things around and scope like that. And it just happens. It's a part of the game, and you need to be prepared for it. And luckily, we have some stashed away to prepare for it. But you always got to be ready for those type of things too.
Mm-hmm. And again, as an indie developer, you're not going to be working with perfect situations all the time. And you do have to adapt and change as demands grow and how things go. And unfortunately, it is a necessary evil when it comes to game development. And it's something that for a lot of smaller developers, they may not be able to do that. They may put all their eggs in one basket, and the second something bad happens, they're done. Like, there's no plan B or plan C to go with it.
Right.
And this is one of the things that Jake has talked about. That one of the reasons why he's very careful about the games he makes and how much money he puts into them is that he wants to make sure that if this game fails, he can still work on another game.
Right.
Just like if it does succeed, if it does blow up, that's great. But it's not the end of the world. And, we can even relate this to, RNG in games and mitigating it. That you want to mitigate as much risk as you can.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, the problem, though, to Melwini's comment is that even at its most basic, at the most level 0, basic understanding, monetization is about pricing your game. That you need to be able to make money in order to keep going, like we've said. And as we've said with like developers like Jake Burgett, that even if his games succeed or fail, he is still able to keep going on. And it's also, and I think this is the other aspect, I think this is another reason why a lot of developers don't like talk about money like this, is that in a way, it does limit what you can do. You can't just sit there and go, again, I'm just going to spend 20 years of my life on this No Man's Sky Star Citizen competitor that will be 500 times bigger than both of them, and, when it's all over, I'll be rolling in money. When you don't have, infinite money, you have to adapt and change. And it can lead to very interesting things. If you, again, one of the more classic examples is from Silent Hill. That the engine that they were using couldn't render everything perfectly, so they created that fog. And the fog not only was a free up on the technical side, but it became one of the most iconic features of the franchise.
Yeah, limitations amazingly create some of the best solutions and ideas. And sometimes, yes, if you're limited by budget or scope and time, sometimes that can cause you to create some of the best like pressure creates diamonds, right? I mean, So like, is it that how? Anyway, but it's limitations like for a game jam example, you're limited. I'm not saying you're going to get good ideas from a game jam. You could, but you're crunched really down in a short time, so you're forced to kind of create this thing, right? And so again, if you're thinking realistically, I need to work on this, and then next I need to work on that. You're going to know I can only devote this much time, this much resources. We only have this much. If things start creeping out of scope, we need to cut this, or we need to not do this. You need to be again make adjustments live. Get the if you're beta testing your game, get ideas out there. Let people test it if you can. QA and adjust accordingly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So go ahead.
And what you just said there about adjusting the scope and the scale of your game,
Yeah.
that is very important. Because sometimes you have to scale small, and sometimes you may have to scale up. Let's say, like with like the Cuphead example, that you release a trailer or you release a demo, and it blows up.
Blows up.
Like,
Yeah.
let's say you just created the next Among Us or the next Vampire Survivors, and people want more. Well, that is a very strong opinion or a very strong decision to why don't we make this bigger if there is a huge audience? Conversely, let's say you release a trailer, let's say you release something, and let's say it's not resonating with people for whatever reason. Well, you can't necessarily just say, well, burn this whole game down, throw it all into the fire, I'm never going to look at it again. How can you adjust it? How can you make it better or even just focus your ideas? With that game that I played, Malice and Greed, that it was another like roguelike style game, they're doing a complete rebuild of their entire system to make it more palatable and more enjoyable to a lot of people. And again, I think this is one of those things that in a perfect world that wouldn't be necessary. You get it right on your first try. But that is very rare. It is very rare to see any developer just say, here's the first idea I ever made. It's 100% perfect, we'll release it, and it gets 10 out of 10s. Game design is about iteration. It is about this constant growth. It's about understanding, how do I keep improving? Because if you don't keep improving, you're going to fall behind. And we see this again when it comes to, from a monetization standpoint, a lot of developers who are either just chasing another idea, or worse, they're chasing an idea and they're doing it worse than that original game. Because that is the worst thing you can do from a development standpoint. Make a worse version of somebody else's game.
Exactly. And we've talked about this many times, like when if so you can't just make your own version of Vampire Survivor light and be worse. Like it has to be as good, but even if it's as good and all of that, remember the Vampire Survivors was the first. So probably be better to do something else or take it and be way more unique about it if you could, right?
Yeah. Let me see if and again, like to Chris's comment, that's something that we've said a whole lot. That just because this is the first thing you see from the studio doesn't mean that's their first project. Not at all. And it's something that I think, it's something we've said before. I know I've written about this, that a lot of developers have a hard time comprehending success or what leads to success. Not only working at the studio, but looking at it from the outside. I've given the example before about Darkest Dungeon with Red Hook Games, that a lot of people assume that, they just release a, moody dungeon crawler. That's all they did, and that was a success. Or, this game was covered by Northern Lion and Bear Taffy. That's how it succeeded. The ever classic, just let PewDiePie play your game, and will lead to riches and jewels and treasure caves of gold doubloons.
That's right. Or like the Fall Guys people, how many they had how many games? They had like a million games, 36, 40 games or whatever before one of their games hit. Like the Fall
Angry
Guys
Birds
dudes.
had like 75 different prototypes and so on. And again, and when I bring up Angry Birds, I know developers are going to pew them. They're going to say, it's just some stupid little mobile game.
No.
It doesn't matter what the quality of the game is. It matters that game, it blew up for them. It became the banner, the marquee game from that studio. Much in the same way that Don't Starve or Oxygen Not Included became from Clay. Or games like Boyfriend Simulator for Kid Fox. What was it? Among Us, from Inner Sloth, and so on. And as a studio, you need to be able, like we've said, like you don't want to just rely on dumb luck. That's, I think, always that thing that, again, a lot of developers will equate to. Oh, this game just got lucky. And yes, there are
No.
games that come out the right time. If you, as you remember with Path of Exile, it came out, I think, either the same year or the year after Diablo 3 just completely missed the mark. And again, that is marketing every developer wishes they could get, but you're not going to have that. You're not going to be able to get that. And sometimes timing does matter, but it should never be just saying, "Oh, this game just got dumb luck and it made 10 millions in sales."
I was looking to see Path of Exile, if that was actually their first. So that's pretty neat.
Yep, and sometimes sometimes there is always a luck factor.
Yeah. But you have to have everything else plus luck, right?
Yeah. And you have to be able to carry or follow through. Let's say you release some weird demo and PewDiePie does cover it, or Northern Lion, or maybe someday me.
That?
Maybe someday when I become a famous super YouTuber, and it does blow up for you. You need to then think, okay, what's my next step? What can I do? And this is the other aspect of making money. How do I keep making money with my games? Because like we've said, it's not about one game. Unless, of course, you have that Minecraft, Among Us, super major, studio genre-defining success, you need to be thinking about what your next game is, and the game after that. And again, this is where money is very important, because if your last game didn't earn you a ton of money, you're going to be starting out kind of at a deficit for your next game. But if you're a game studio, well, if you're not making games, you're not earning money.
Exactly. I mean, like currently, my studio, we have 2 in production right now. We have like 2 more or 3 more that we were planning ahead. So we were planning ahead for which games we're going to do. We're already planning. We're working on one. While you're working on one, you're experimenting with something else or planning other ideas or whatever. But it's not the one game. You're working to keep working on your next game. That's fine. The yacht thing, if you get lucky, good for you. But that's not what the reality of it is for most of us here.
And I mean, there is definitely a greater topic about how do you manage future projects, which I think that could be one for the list to add on. And it is tough, again, when we're talking about money. As we've said before, and as anyone who does business will tell you, money changes things. It is that time when things become real. When you're not just sitting there going, oh, maybe I'll make this, maybe I'll make that, who cares? It's time to think, okay, how do I earn enough money so I can buy food this month and keep my lights on? I mean, it's something that I've had to consider a lot with the stuff I do. I take sponsor posts for Game Wisdom for extra money that helps Al around here. I do the books. I do my library talks. And I think this, again, like as we were saying earlier about marketing being evil, the idea of, you are selling out. This is another thing we hear from a lot of indie developers and Facebook and Reddit groups, oh, you're cutting a trailer, you're just selling out. Oh, you want to work with a publisher or you want to do marketing, you're just selling out. No, again, into Chris's comment about what marketing is, it's about shouting the praises of your game. It's about making sure that you are excited about your game and you want other people to be excited about your game.
That's right. You are the cheerleader of your game. You're the one that's supposed to be the most excited about it. You know all about it. No one else knows about it. So you have to show them in all the positive ways and all the positive lights. You're the cheerleader for your game. So, I mean, no one else will. No one else is going to hype up your game.
Unless you hire a marketing team.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. And to Melanie's comment, like Plants vs. Zombies, that's another very big point. Like we've said, that monetization is a factor when it comes to your games, whether it's free to play or not. I think we'll spend some time on free to play, I think, in like the next section or whatever our next topic is. But this is where we kind of get to when people talk about the dark side of marketing. When Ramin and I have our discussions about light side, dark side tactics. That Monetization or earning money should be about, getting the money you need to fund this game and be a success. But when you start tweaking things in order to manipulate people into spending money, or tweaking things and make the game worse in the pursuit of money, that's when you kind of go off the rails. And again, we've seen this before. Stuff like a Battle for Middle, what was it? A Shadow of War, Star Wars Battlefront 2, a Diablo Immortal, that other game no one's ever heard of.
Yeah, I could barely make it to the stream because I was so busy, playing it. I barely.
Yeah, I'm sure Chris's son is ordering every single purchase
right.
off of Diablo Immortal as we speak. And again, this is where marketing and monetization gets its bad reputation. Because a lot of people equate stuff like what we see from Candy Crush Saga, King and Zynga, to you just making an excitable 90-second trailer about your indie game.
Exactly.
We need to get both Joshes a crown there. We need both. We need two Josh crown night.
There we go.
Exactly, Chris. Yeah. And again, as a developer, what you do in terms of marketing is obviously not the same that Activision Blizzard is going to do, or EA, and so on.
Yeah, definitely. And remember, we have, as an indie, you have a ton of strengths, right? To be, again, nimble, pivot. You can do some really cool and wild stuff. I have seen some of the coolest trailers from indie games doing the weirdest, strangest stuff that, a AAA company could never do. And I've been like, oh, I'm buying your game just because you have a coolest trailer. You know what I mean? So we can do really cool things and just finding your market,
Yeah. And again, a major point of marketing is being able to say, why should someone buy this game? What is the unique selling point? And that relates again back to what your core gameplay loop is and what it means to do good prototyping and playtesting. So a lot of this stuff, it all connects. And again, I'll bring up that quote that Z from Serenity Forge told me, that there's as much business in the art as there is art in the business. If you want to succeed, and I mean not just make one good game, but have a studio that is successful, you need to be thinking about both of these things, about both the art side and the business side. Because like we said, business and marketing is not evil. And a lot of developers will fight you, tooth and nail on that point. I don't want to do marketing or look at this stuff that's going to stifle my creative freedom. I'm going to hate the game I want to make. But like we said, what marketing is being that cheerleader. Being able to say, I want to make this game, I love this game, and I want other people to know why I love this title. And like we said, if you're genuine about it, obviously you shouldn't be lying in terms of your marketing. There's your brilliant marketing tip for the stream.
Please don't lie.
Yeah. But if you are genuine, if you make a game that you really love and you tell people why you really love it and they really love it, that gets out. People start talking about this game. They start learning and wanting to support you. And like we've said, with the double-edged sword fandom, this is how you build a fan base. This is how people start talking about it. So that maybe if that first game just breaks even, or just barely breaks even, you now have an install base for your next game. Exactly. And that install base for your game after that should be bigger if you're doing things right. So that, again, it's not about your first game turning into Minecraft, but maybe by your fourth, fifth, sixth game, you are doing really well for yourself.
You're sustaining yourself. The goal is you're learning the art, you're learning the craft, and through each one, the plan is to sustain yourself, to put food on the table, to pay rent, to continue and produce another game, right? Again, you don't want to mortgage your house on your first game. Expect everything, you lose everything, and it never. I've seen so many devs flame out on their first game, and it's I always say, on the previous podcast, for your first game, you got to start really small. Start small, get out there, learn the process, start networking, and as you go in there and you get to your 10th game, your 11th game or something like that, you're really going to get it
Yeah.
going, right?
Yeah, and the cynic in me, as you're saying that, is thinking that there are some developers who hear that, and they're probably like vomiting in their mouth. They're like,
Right,
an
right.
11th game? You mean I
11,
gotta
yeah.
make 10, 11 games before I succeed? What the heck? What kind of foolish talk is that?
Right, right. But that's the way it works. I mean, like, unless you're lucky,
Hmm?
you're gonna have to do that and you're gonna have to put in the grind. There's a lot of other noise out there, and until you find out all the ways everything works, because there's so many things, from marketing to scope to teams to source control, just how you manage the finances, everything. And so you just want to get good at it, get used to it. What is it? 10 years and you become a master, right, Josh? So
Hmm.
I mean, you kind of got to think about it. You're going to have to put in some work, or what is it? 100 out? I don't remember. Become a master sometime. So it
Yeah.
takes a lot of time to put it in, and so that's it. That's what it is. And you need to be prepared. How am I going to be sustainable to work on for my next project, to my next project, to my next project? You don't want instant virality. Imagine, like we were just talking about, if you have something blow up real quick and you're not prepared for it, what are you going to do? You know
Yep.
what I mean? So you have to be.
Yep. And again, like when you have that lightning in the bottle moment, you don't want to waste it. You want to be able to keep doing more. You want to grow from it. You don't want to go like up and then go immediately
Yep.
back down.
Yep.
Ideally, you just want consistent growth. You want to make
Growth.
sure that the bomb is not going to fall out from underneath you when you're trying to build your game or your next game or the game after that. And like we've said, there's a reason why developers who succeed typically keep succeeding, and
Yeah.
why the ones that fail, unfortunately, keep on failing.
Failing.
That there's a reason why we look at someone like Supergiant Games. The very first game from that studio was Bastion. That was a amazing title. They
Love that
followed that
one.
up with Transistor, which was another highly quality title. And even with Pyre, that is kind of considered like their black sheep game, or the one that the least amount of people played. It still kept within that branding of that company. And again, like we've said before, like a company like Nintendo, you don't immediately go from Super Mario Bros. NES to Super Mario Odyssey in the span of one game. It takes growth, it takes iteration, and it takes being able to understand and improve what you're doing from game to game. You shouldn't just be making the same game, every year from your studio. You need to be able to do more than that. And like we've said, just as, people are willing to spend more on games today, they're also expecting more. So if you think I'm just going to make the same, 2D action platformer 10 times in a row and charge $15 for it, people aren't going to be interested in that. They may give you slack off your first game. They're not. They're going to be done by like your second or fourth game.
Yeah, and again, that's like you mentioned. Go, what their players are going to expect, and that's your marketing, right? Your marketing research and
Mm-hmm.
checking to see, well, do they have like facial capture in these types of games, or they're usually voiced? Like all those little things matter, because your game can totally, oh well, the faces are static, but there's usually in the $30 games of this range, they have mocap and they have this kind of stuff. And if you don't, those, like, you have to be aware of what the games in your genre commonly do.
Yep. And if you can't meet that, then you need to change your scope and change how you're marketing your game.
Exactly.
Because again, if you think, well, I'm going to release this game and charge $34.99, and let's say a $30 game is just up here while you're down here, then maybe that doesn't work. And again, like, what is your core gameplay loop demand? Does it demand, motion capture, mimicking the exact mouth and facial structure of the voice actors? Or is it a game about, I don't know, watching circles bounce around in a pinball machine?
Right. Right. And then again, you got to be aware, like, that pinball machine that bounces around, like, what kind of How the menus, do they use transactions, microtransactions? Like, be aware. You have to be aware every genre, every situation.
Yeah. And again, if you, as an indie developer, you can pivot and change. And honestly, you should be able to do that. If you are trying to work on a game and you are so railroaded in that
Yeah.
you can't
Yeah.
do anything else with it, that is probably a red flag for your studio that something has gone wrong. That if you have no choice and you can release and you have to release this game just like this despite all these issues and all these problems, that's not good. That is
Yeah.
one of those things you want to avoid walking into.
Definitely, and just like I'm bringing up an example with my game, right now we had a change in funding, so we have to adjust scope and make accordingly, right? But we're releasing it, we're reducing the scope, we're not going full force with the thing and reducing it with all the bugs that don't work because we were going to do them. We changed the scope accordingly, right? And be prepared to do that.
Yep. And if you're, do we do? I'm pretty sure we did tutorials, but there's always more we can discuss when it
Yeah,
comes to tutorial
definitely.
design.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I know we've touched on it before, like
Mhm.
usually,
Yeah. And if you're able to keep adjusting, again, that shows that you're able to roll with the punches. You're able to adapt. And that's ultimately one of the major points of running a business. That if your business only works when everything is working 100% perfectly and there's no problems, that's not good business. Because again, the second you have one problem,
that's it.
yep. I mean, that's one of the things why I like kind of the more slow and steady growth of game wisdom is that I don't have all my eggs in one basket. I'm doing 3 or 4 different things at a time. And because of that, if one doesn't work, I'm not immediately screwed out of another.
Yeah.
I can hear dishes, so I'm going to close my door really fast.
Unfortunately, like when it comes to game design, your studio, it is slow and steady wins the race. I know a lot of devs, like we were talking about, you want to hit lightning in the bottle first, but it really is slow and steady wins the race. And you want it that way. Like I said, you don't want virility can destroy you. Like if something blows up and you're not ready, that can sink your ship. So of all things, you do want slow and steady growth. That's the best way. You're growing nice and steady. It's gonna stay there, right? It's not gonna just disappear if you're building it slowly and slowly and slowly. And that's what you're looking for. Sustainability of your studio. You want your studio to last. I mean, if you're in this and you really want to do this, you're in this to build another game. You want to build another game. You're already thinking about the next game you want to build. And all of that requires food and rent and the money and the monetization. And none of that is evil. We all know we all know this. We're all humans. We have the basic necessities. Right, Josh, sorry.
I wasn't saying that. Was just
Okay, yeah. I mean, like that's just the way it is. So again, marketing, I think now we're all starting to understand that it's not evil. It might be hard, but really it's most parts of it is just understanding who who you're selling the game to, who you're making the game for, right? You can make your dream project all you want if you can afford it, or you could make a game for people, right? Make the game for people. So
yeah. Oh, and to Axiom Comedy, we still have to do our genre-specific podcast. We're almost I think we're almost ready to do one about platform. We just got to nail things down for our special guest for it.
Yeah, we're getting close there, yes.
Yep, and I mean, talk... and Chris is just becoming the pro Fall Guys player. Well, I know, tell people that you became a pro Fall Guys player by listening to our streams. It gave you the motivation, like Gatorade. It gave you the Gatorade to succeed. And like speaking about being able to understand your market and all that, I mean, a kind of, I guess, good and bad example of this would be Zachtronics. Because as we know, like Last Call BPS is going to be like his final like original game. And like he's definitely, I think, he has his specific niche. There's a reason why we now call some of these games Zach likes.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, his games never got close to being a Minecraft or a Fall Guys or anything like that. And it is, I think, it's a bitter pill to swallow. But again, this is why being sustainable is important. That if you can release a niche game, if you can make a game that is so weird and different, but it still is keeping the lights on, then good for you on that. But you then should immediately say, well, this game sold 20,000 copies. I bet my next game will sell 5 billion copies, and I'm going to work on this for 15 years because everything I learned from that first game, just I don't need to learn anything else.
Right. And like I'm kind of preach that. Like I think you should. I want to have shorter game development cycles. You know what I mean? As indie games, we can do it, and so that way you can just keep cranking out games and keep practicing. And I think that's probably a good key. There is that again, I've said this before. Don't spend 22 years working on your game. You need to spend maybe way less than that. And I preach much smaller game development cycles for that reason alone.
Yep, and to Axiom's comment, yeah, I mean, Chris from Arkin, we have him on for the roundtables. I've told him many times he has not been shy about the financial issues he's had with Arkin and a lot of his games that have failed. And again, it's great that AI War kept his studio going for so long, and now he's doing better. But that is not what you want to see from a studio. You don't want one game to basically be the sole arbiter of whether or not you're going to keep living or dying as a studio. And it is tough. Again, following up what you do is a very hard topic. And some developers will just kind of, stay the course and not do anything different. Some developers will go here, then down there, then over here, and then they'll make a visual novel, then they'll make a Fall Guys, and they'll make a No Man's Sky. And that's also not really effective. And again, game dev, the actual game dev side, this is where we talk about the business side. This is where it's time to actually put numbers and values to everything that you do. And it's not exciting. It's not, the fun part of making a game. But at the end of the day, if you're not, again, the kind of like the MO for our cast today is, if there's no money coming in, your studio's not going to survive.
Yeah, it's the only way to keep this afloat. Pug said earlier in the comments, it's one of the hardest things. And again, it's not the hardest thing. It's just something that I think we need to adjust to it, that it's not evil. Like, again, we have those feelings that it's evil, it's bad. We're not trying to take people's money. We're making a product, we're making content, and it's right. So we're not bamboozling people, right? And I think that's where people feel that marketing is. It's like, oh yeah, buy this or whatever. But instead, we're shouting to the rooftops, we're cheerleading, and this is why you want to buy it. This is the type of game it is. It's not like trickery. It's none of that. So if you're not doing any of that, then it's not evil, right? It's not inherently evil. It's not inherently hard or whatever. So it's just the hard part would be finding your audience and doing your research and all that stuff. And that can be the boring part, the numbers and munching through it, but that is the necessary thing that you need to do.
And with Chris and Arkin, that it's important to be able to understand why your games aren't succeeding. That, again, is a major point about game dev. It's another thing that a lot of developers do not like to do. They do not like to talk about why their game didn't work or what they could have done better. But that is a necessary part about growth. It's about understanding, well, if this didn't work, maybe we should try this next time.
Yeah, I want to do something. I've been talking to you about it. That we always talk about the successes, but I think that analyzing failures and stuff. If we would talk about certain ones and discuss it and analyze it, why, and that way we can extract some things from it. I think that would be a good future topic for us to go over. I think it's important, not play the bad games too. Why is this game bad? When you play a good game, you probably get less out of it than you do if you're playing a good game. You're like, yeah, I understand it's good, but if it's so good, you're usually missing some parts with you know what I mean? So when you're playing the bad, you know why it's bad. And so that way you know what to avoid in a way.
Yep, it's one reason why I say, like, for a lot of the books and a lot of my research, I play games of all, qualities: good, bad,
Bad.
weird, niche, whatever. Because if you only play good games, you're not seeing the pitfalls. If you only play Mario and they say, well, I'm going to build a platformer, you're not really understanding, what work went into Mario. Why does
Yeah, you need to play
Mario.
Rayman.
Yep. Exactly. What goes into Mario that's different from Rayman, which is different from Super Meat Boy, which is different from.
Little Big Planet.
Yep. And unfortunately for a lot of developers, this again is that boring stuff. It's the research, it's the
Hmm.
planning.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean that's one of the things is like as a game dev, you want to get in there and you want to just start putting things around, making stuff work in that, but you really got to sit down and plan beforehand and know what you're doing, right? And make adjustments accordingly, scope adjustments.
Yep. And again, just because you make plans doesn't mean you can't. Doesn't mean those plans are going to stay fixed. You have to
Right.
have backups. You need to be
Exactly.
able to pivot and change.
Exactly. And again, because you're all indie games, like mostly solo or one or two, we're so nimble. So you can always pivot and change and don't be bullheaded about this is the way it was. If something happens and something needs to change, there's issues with some of the code, needs to that's okay. Cut things out, remove things,
Hmm.
it's okay. It's better than leaving it in completely broken. Doesn't make sense. No one understands why, but you're like, yeah, but I put it in, right?
Again, the whole, the video game is your baby kind of
Yeah,
attitude.
yeah. I can't do that. That doesn't work. It. I don't know. I'm trying to think. Content game or whatever. It's just a video game, right? But it's definitely not your baby in that sense at all.
Hmm. Let's see. We are about an hour in. I'm trying to think if there's anything else before we talk more about things from a free to play or a live service side. Any topics from you?
Let's go. No, let's go ahead and get to the free to play stuff.
Okay. So we've spent the bulk of this discussion talking about things from a retail standpoint, but it's important to talk about things from a live service, a free to play point of view. I'm just reading Chris's exploits on Fall Guys while he's watching the stream. But when we talk about things from a free to play standpoint, this is where we get to that even more murkier side. Because at the end of the day, like we've said, you need to earn money from your content, from the work you put into it. But how much money should you get? And this was a major point about that post I wrote about how free is free to play. Yes, this game is free to play, but if you think that a new character is worth $600 or $2,000, that feels, I think, a little off to me.
Yeah, definitely. And that was you made an really good point is that we probably need to have standardization like
Mm-hmm.
in what a character's worth, what a weapon is worth. Like it's not going away. I mean, I think it's like 22% of mobile games or let me see. I had it up here. Anyway, something like 22% of mobile games are still using like use monetization, right?
Yeah.
Are all games. So like that's almost a quarter of all games using some form of in-game transaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot. And like the mobile game industry is massive. What we're talking on the PC, free to play on the PC is 23 billion. If we go to mobile,
Mm-hmm.
it's 78 billion.
Yeah, the whole. I think there's that thought that the mobile market was going to die or free to play was going to die. It's not happening. It's kind of again
Never
like saying, "Oh, PC gaming is dead." Or
done.
we're
Yeah.
all, tomorrow we're all going to stop using Steam.
Mm-hmm.
Steam will
Mm-hmm.
disappear tomorrow in the blink of an instant.
No more
It's
MMOs.
yeah, and let's see, imagine. Yeah, and again, like to Chris' comment, that's what that whole loot box law that was being discussed in
Yeah.
2019 was about.
Yeah.
And like we were talking about with Ron Mean, that if that went ahead as planned, all free to play would have died the next day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like we've said, like even if your game isn't free to play, let's say you want to support your game long term and do a live service model. This is another thing you have to think about. How much is a piece of content worth in your game? Not just again from a development standpoint, but from a pricing standpoint. If an artist spent, let's say, 3 months working on a new skin for a character, do you go around and charge that $40? Do you say $100 for that? Do you say 99 cents?
Yeah, definitely have to. Yeah, we definitely need some kind of like standardization on that
Yeah.
because it's all over the place. It's just place.
And like I said, I'm playing Arc Knights, and yeah, they give you a lot of free resources. They're having their 2.5 year anniversary for their global servers. That's great and all, but they still have like a pity that can cost like $400+ for a 6-star character, especially if it's a limited time character. And I mean, you can say that developer can be very fair in one aspect, but they can be also completely unfair in another. I mean, there are lots of mobile and free to play games that it feels, and I think this again gets back to like when people talk about the dark side of all this, that it feels like the game was there to sell you on the monetization as opposed to the monetization supporting the game.
Right.
And I forget who said this earlier. I think it may have been Joe who was saying about wanting to support free to play games
Hmm.
in terms of giving back to developers. Like that
Right.
is ultimately the dream mindset that developers want for their games. That the game is so fair, it's so good that it feels almost criminal not to spend $1 or
Right. It's like
$5.
how can I not pay for this game? It's amazing. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you want to do, not uh forcing people to play like you said,
Or manipulating them.
manipulating them. I mean,
And that
wow.
that again, like read my book because I talk about a lot of those tactics that have gone into it. Most games feel like, yep, and yep, that to Chris's comment right there is
Perfect,
what
perfect.
you have to be very aware of. Am I making this game just to sell you, my microtransaction monetization? Or am I making this game so that the monetization kind of
And
makes this game better, that it enhances it, that
or
it
to support to keep it alive.
exactly. This is why we talk about games like Fall Guys, Dead by Daylight, Path of Exile, Warframe, and so on. That they support these games month after month, year after year, and so on, and that monetization funds it. Again, like when if you haven't seen it, that Valve game, I think it was in 2012, about turning Team Fortress into free to play. They basically said that we want to support this game, but if there's no more money coming in, we're going to bankrupt ourselves because we're going to take all the profits we earn with the retail price of Team Fortress. It goes down the toilet because we're working on this game more. Like we've said, at the end of the day, no matter what you're doing, whether it's a free to play or a retail game, there has to be money coming in order to justify it. And some developers will release free DLC and free expansions and all that. And yes, that is great to help your game. But if let's say your game brought in, let's say, $50,000 of revenue and it costs you $75,000 to make a new DLC that no one's buying, well, there goes your money.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, you need to plan way far ahead. And like if you're in that type of predicament, what you just said, it sounds like you're trying to catch up to monetize
Mm-hmm.
because you didn't plan ahead, right? That where you'd be in that situation.
Yeah. And I would say, I guess here's a question for you again and for the chat. Do you think it's fair for a developer to be thinking about monetization or additional content or additional pricing for their game while they're developing it? Like, let's
Yeah,
say,
totally. Go ahead. No, go. Can you?
I was just saying, like, in
Wait,
terms of, like, let's say expansions or DLC or more content, 6, 12, 18 months after release.
wow. I and like as their sole like is it like their sole profit or just for increasing profit later
I
or
would say for increasing profit. Like, let's say it's a
yeah.
single player game. Let's say it is a 6 to 10 hour long game, and
Mm-hmm.
you're thinking, well, what if I, could come with an expansion and start thinking
Hmm.
about, let's say, 2 more stages, or I'm going to create a weapons pack or a map pack or something like that. You're thinking, yeah, like about like what Chris saying, like you're thinking about future development for this
Yeah.
project?
Well, I think it would have to be. I think you do have to think about it, but you have to be realistic, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
if it's selling, if it's not, like how well is the game doing, right? Is the
Yep.
game doing well or not? Because if you're doing it to try and inject life back into it, probably not going to work. Could, but I mean, if it's selling well, then yeah, definitely, right? Like, have a
Yeah.
plan ahead of time just in case. Be thinking about it. I mean, I've already thought of, okay, what could I create for Samurai Pig just in case I needed to, whatever. And it's, you know what I mean. But only if it reached a certain sell point would I invest that time or that money. It would have to reach certain metrics for me to say, okay, let's go ahead and invest the time back, because we're already going to be, once it's released and done and patched, we're
Mm-hmm.
already working on the next one, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but I think that again, it's important. Like, and like to Chris's point, there's a difference between saying how do I support my game long term versus how do I milk my consumers long term. And again, like this is a point that Chris has brought up about like how he thought about expansions and content for his games. That he treats the retail version of this game as just this encapsulated bubble. Like everything that's in this bubble is exactly what I want this game to be. This is my game, you know, the heart and soul of it. Now I come with these other ideas. These are great, you know, it would be cool to have, but they're not required by this loop. So that if, let's say, this game does great, let's say it does blow up enough that people want an expansion, well, I have this idea right here. And let's say it fails. Let's say this expansion doesn't do anything, it's gone. Well, then I know not to work on it, you know, then my game is done. You know, that's it. But then let's say people really love this. Well, then let's say I have a great idea that's also secondary. I can attach it like that. So he treats his games very much like compartmentalizing his ideas and his design.
definitely.
So that again, like if one succeeds, he can move to the next idea. If it doesn't succeed, if there's just no interest, well, you know, this little idea is still a great game. And
Yeah, so
that
you'd be like tiers of success editions, right?
yeah, kind of like a nesting doll almost.
There you go.
But at the end of the day, he still wants that retail release 1.0 to be a finished and polished concept. He wants it to be a finished product that works. And he wants to make sure that people want to play that. Because if they don't want to play that first version,
There's no reason. Yeah,
yeah.
there's no reason to.
Mm-hmm. All right. Let's see. Yep. And again, being able to adjust your monetization is another very big point. And you do, again, whether you're working on a free-to-play retail game, you should be thinking about how is this game going to earn money. Again, the simple answer, of course, is, you know, I charge $19.99 or $14.99 or whatever for it, and people buy it. But for some games, it's about thinking about, okay, do we have cosmetic skins? Do we have in-game weapons? Do we have new maps? Was it a season passes, gotchas, loot boxes? You know, the thing about monetization, what I talked about, is that it is not limited to your imagination. There are many creative ways and purchases that you can have for your game.
Yeah, that haven't even been done yet or implemented yet, and they're, you know, still waiting to be done.
Yep. Let's see, to TY. Yeah, I mean, again, if your game, if the DLC,
Yeah.
and this is another topic right there. Like, if the DLC fixes or makes your base game better, that's not good. You want your base game to be standalone. It should be good enough to play on its own merits.
Like a No Man's Sky thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, fair, yeah. And I mean, you can. And again, when your game grows, it always becomes that factor of what do I keep doing with it. As a good example, I'm thinking about trying to get back into Dead by Daylight as for their 6.5 year like major event.
Wow, I should give that. Yeah, are you going to do it for multiplayer or?
I'm not sure about tonight. Maybe next week. I'm still debating on it, but with that, they have just completely rebalanced and regutted the entire perk system and how everything works. And again, that is high risk, high reward. Because if, again, you add something or you change something that people liked, then you risk just pissing them all off, and now
Right,
they're
because
not.
they've been dealing with it for what, 6 years like this, and they're gonna completely change it. That's
Mm-hmm.
wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, again, we talk about meta. You know, you do not want a solidified meta with a any
Right.
kind of live service game, and that
Right.
requires additional purchases, additional content, and it is tough. And it is one of the things I think from making money with your game. I think this will be my final point that you also have to understand one very crucial element. There is always going to come a time where your game is not going to earn money anymore. That
Yeah.
everyone who's bought it has already bought it. Maybe you can get by with DLCs and extended purchases like that. But the days in which, if your game was up here, it may, stay here. And that's it. And that's something you need to consider. Again, it's why we've said that sustainable long term game development is very important. Because if you expect, if your first game does well and you just go right out and buy, 5 cars, a mansion, your own island, and then no one buys that game the next month or now all your profits are gone, what are you going to do?
Yeah. I know I'm on the island right now, so if Samurai Pig doesn't work, I don't know what I'm gonna do, Josh.
You have to
So
sell your yacht. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah. Yep, and again, like to Chris's comment about like with Fall Guys, like people are very perceptive when it comes to you changing a game from a monetization standpoint. Again, do not discredit your consumers and the thing that they'll fall for this trick or they'll just do this and that. The people who cover your games, your hardcore fans, your hardcore players, they will data mine the heck and back out of your
it,
game.
I have seen they literally like data mine everything, the code, like literally everything. There will be people dissecting your game, dissecting
Mhm.
the numbers in ways like you wouldn't even believe. You're like, how did they even they know everything? Yeah, it's so you can't really hide anything or trick anybody anymore like that. So
Yeah,
don't
and
do that.
and again, when people hear about this, when they detect that you are doing something scummy or a dark
They're
side tactic, they will tell everyone.
yeah, they're coming after
Trust
you.
me, with
Yeah,
YouTubers and influencers, there will be dozens and hundreds of videos. Did you hear developer did this? Developer
can you
cheating
believe this?
fans.
Yeah, horrible dev. Can you believe this? And it's the yeah, you'll get destroyed.
Yeah. Look at World of Tanks and Wargaming when they pulled out a lot of their shadier practices. The stuff that Ramin and I were talking about when he had his big expose about them. That people do not forget this stuff. They may be willing to forgive, but they're not going to forget. I mean, with Dead by Daylight, they do. I mean, a lot of their DLC is new characters, and like the maps are free, but the new killers and survivors are oftentimes put into one of their little bundle practices. But again, like changing and adding new stuff has to be treated very carefully. It has to make sense for your game, and it has to be something that keeps people interested in playing. If you change your game for the worse, well, those people aren't going to stay around.
Definitely, definitely a tightrope to walk. I mean, sometimes it's going to pay off big time, and I guess they feel like it's a risk willing to take. Sometimes it works,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it doesn't. Let's see what happens. I'm
Mm.
kind of interested. I want to play it. I want to see what they did.
All right. Well, maybe we can do that tonight. While if Chris can't make it for Fall Guys.
We'll do it next week. Next week, right? And then Fall
Yeah,
Guys is
either we'll
yeah.
see. We'll play it by ear. See who's free for tonight. All right. I think that's my final point. So, do you have any points for yourself?
Okay. I just wanted to reiterate, like, okay, so the like we this the whole basis was about like the Unity thing, right? What's his name? Riccitiello, John
John
Riccitiello.
Riccitiello. Yeah.
Yeah, but John Riccitiello's comment. But there's a lot of truth to it. So like there's a lot, like it wasn't said correctly. But a lot of the things, like all about the whole story, if you look, you can extract a lot about it. Some business mergers they made, things like that. If you study it, there's some stuff in there to help you learn and understand business in a different way. But again, just one of the main things, like my the quote here about that, the challenge is no longer having just an interesting idea. We have to do more than that, and the point is rising above the noise. There's so much noise now, and I mainly talking about the mobile market, right? Like you go from the mobile market, it was 23 billion free to play on PC to 78 million, right? So that's a huge difference, and you really have to stand out, right? So we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about like user acquisition, marketing, and stuff like that. So just remember that having a good game, having and all that is not enough, right? You need to make sure you have to know, you have to start thinking about it from the second you're making the game. Like,
Yeah.
who's my audience? From the prototype. Once you're like, what's the prototype I'm gonna make? You start messing with it. Who's this gonna be for? Who's my market? Um, and then start going from there, and like be ready to make changes, be ready to adjust scope. Just
Yeah.
be nimble, and I guess that's basically all I got to say about that. There,
Yep. And always be learning. Always
always be
learn and
learning.
improve. If something took you, 2 years to make on your first game, see if you can. Maybe you've improved one. You can do it in 1 year or
One year,
six
exactly.
months or
Six
any.
months.
Yeah.
6 months. Right, exactly. 2 years, do it in 6 months. And keep iterating. Keep it. This
Mm-hmm.
is about iteration. This is about sustainability. Slow and steady wins the race. You're not trying to make that big hit, because what are you going to do after that? How
Yeah.
would you even be prepared if you've never gone through the rigmarole multiple times, right?
Yep. Hey, David, we are talking about monetization in all
That's
aspects of
right.
games and what it means as a studio and a developer. Survival
Correct.
on ramen, exactly. That's the other important tip there from Pug. And yep, and like we said, there's no shame in marketing. There's no don't think about it. Don't think about if you're thinking about monetization or how I'm going to charge people for money or how am I going to earn money. Don't think of that as being evil. If you are treating this with respect, if you are not trying to fleece or lie to your consumers, it is, again, at the end of the day, about being able to sustain yourself. It's about
Right.
earning money so you can keep living and doing what you love. And
Right, sustaining yourself and the game that they like, so the game can stay alive, and so can you as a
yeah,
dev, and make another one.
yeah. And I asked people when I started posting like these sponsored posts on Game Wisdom, they like a lot of people said, well, you need this money to go living, so we're fine with that. And again, like it's money that keeps the lights on. It's not like we're earning. Again, neither Josh has an island. Maybe someday
Right.
we'll have Josh Island. There we go, where all the Joshes can congregate.
That's right. That's right, Josh.
but but you need to be able to understand, or you need to be able to answer that question: how am I living off of this game? And again, to some people, it's a very simple answer to have. To other people, it's the riddle of the Sphinx. How do I keep. And again, if you can't make money off of a game, you're going to have that hard talk. Should I keep working on it in this capacity? If this idea you have, let's say your thing is going to take 10 years to scope out and make, and you think you can only get $5 from it, it's probably not a worthwhile investment.
No.
Again, there is no shame in putting an idea on the back burner or stopping a project. It's better to stop a project 2 months, 3 months in, as opposed to 4 years, six
Yeah.
years, 10 years down the line.
Yeah, because especially then, man, if you're like in 4 years into a project and it's like, oh, what do I do? And I just know a studio, they were 3 years in and they lost their funding and got canceled. And I mean, wow,
Yeah.
so
And again, if you're spending all that time, you still don't know what your game's about, or you haven't even gotten your core gameplay loop done, something is not right. Yeah, and many developers, like to Joe's comment, that they do part-time work, they do freelance, and they do other
Mm-hmm.
gigs to help support their game.
Yep.
And there is no shame in that as well. I mean, yeah, again, like game dev is a fun business, but it's still a
Not a taxi
business.
card.
You have to be able to, again, consider where this money is coming from. And I know, like, some people, like we said with John Riccitiello, like, it's all money. Like, it is
Money,
100%
money, money.
money, product driven, like that. And there are some, and that is not how you make a healthy game. But conversely, if you are 100% art, I don't care about money whatsoever. I will, put this game on napkins and just, put it around my local town. That's how I'll market my game.
I'm gonna go do that. I'm gonna go.
That's also not going to help you out. I'll take a pizza if anyone's offering. And
Same
this,
here. Some pizza here.
there we go. And it is a tough thing to talk about. And it's a question, like we've said, that people oftentimes, there you go, napkin game. People don't want to have this discussion, but unfortunately, it is necessary. If you want to think about where you're going to be, not, 2 days, 1 month, but we're talking 5 years, 10 years down the line, you need to be able to have this discussion. It's a difference between developers like Cliff Harris, Jake Brigade, Jeff Vogue, versus developers who they put everything into one game, they have no idea what they're doing, and then they're gone. Because, again, there are a lot of games, and I have personally played so many from developers who they just release one game
Mm-hmm.
and it bankrupts them, and they're done.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've been doing this for 8, 9 years now. Released a few games, so like I've made it through the initial. Um, but yeah, I know like so many devs like their first one and that's it. Pour their heart and so it's hard. It's a very hard. That's a different podcast. The whole
Mm-hmm.
making the game issue, the whole thing. That's difficult. And but surviving and getting paid for it and getting to the next game, you have to, that's what you should be thinking forward to. And putting all your eggs in a basket is not safe at all. And I've seen it happen so many times to so many devs, and they
Yeah.
just burn out and they're like this, so it is something you have to be prepared and mentally ready for, you know what I mean? Slow and steady. It's a long game.
Yep.
It's not something that you're not gonna, if you're, very few get success overnight, and if you do, how are you gonna continue it, and how are you gonna
Yep.
keep it going? Not a lot have. So
Yep, and even like big name developers, like people who've
big.
cut their teeth in AAA, who've worked on games like Grand Theft
Yes,
Auto or a
yes.
Nintendo game, they go into the independent space and they oftentimes struggle because suddenly they're not working for a company that has unlimited resources, or they just think that, again, my name, because I was so and
That's
so.
my name, right? But they forget, like, they had a PR marketing, like they had a texture artist, they had all this other stuff working around them. And usually when I see like a AAA guy like jump into the indie space, I'm pretty much gonna guarantee that it's not gonna do so well because it's such a different world. You know what I mean?
Yep, they
Uh,
they think they can do AAA at the
in
indie level.
indie level,
And
exactly.
that's not how it works. Even with the most ambitious, the most amazing indie games, they're still in their own little universe.
Yeah,
And again, this is not me denouncing or downplaying indie games. It's just a matter of a different market. It's a matter of being a different mindset for the games that we play. Again, like,
mindset.
if you think that, a company like BioWare or EA could release a game in the same scope or so on as, say, Kit Fox or developers of Celeste, it's not going to happen. They're just two completely different ways of designing games. And you have to be able to work with what you have. And if you can't, then you are going to suffer. And it's going to
Exactly.
be a hard and painful lesson. for you to learn.
Very, very painful. And again, the limitations that you have, whether it be money or engine, just whatever, what the limitations, use those to your benefit. Like, though, you can use the limitations to create
Mm-hmm.
amazing things. Like, if you had access to every single thing, you would not be able to decide what to do, right? You like, if you say, okay, I have all the
Mm-hmm.
assets and I have all of this, what are you going to do? Right? The limitations are actually what is going to help create a really nice product in the end.
Yeah. To David's comment about ads on mobile games, I feel like that monetization has kind of sailed, or it's kind of gone down over the last years. I think
Mm,
it depends. I think on the level of the game. Like if you're talking about making like a core or hardcore game, like a Azure Lane, a Genshin Impact, that kind of thing, then ads are just getting in the way of that. Like
you're right.
that feels like, again, like you're forcing the ads into the game as opposed to having the monetization be an element of the game itself. Like we see again with stuff like some of the more popular gotcha and mobile driven games.
Yeah, it would have to be like ads. It would have to be like a hyper casual game where it's like just at
Yeah.
the bottom or something like that. But yeah, if there was an ad in Genshin Impact just popping up there, that's not going to work. It depends on the game. So like if it was that bouncy pinball game and the
Mm-hmm.
ads just there, that'll work. At the bottom, or when you like fail and then you have to watch a commercial.
Mm-hmm.
That's another one of the things. There's so many ways to do it, but yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure there is a lot more. But I think with that, let's wrap things up because we're just over 90 minutes. I don't think there's anything else, at least for me, that I can think of.
No, I think we covered it all. Yeah, I guess we got it all, Josh.
All right. We'll definitely have to add again, like thinking about working on future games to the list.
Yeah,
And if you
definitely.
guys have any other suggestions for topics, let us know in the comments down below. But we'll wrap things here for the live show. I'd like to thank everyone. We had a lot of people on, so thank you for coming out to watch things live. If you want
Really
to catch
appreciate it.
the show live, we do them Saturdays starting around 5 p.m. ET. If you'd like to follow me and all my stuff, there's my stuff on the overlay. There's links down below. Do liking, subscribing, and commenting.
Right? Be sure to buy Josh's books, join the Discord. My links are down below. Follow me on Twitter, Wishlist Samurai Pig. I'm on Twitch, so you can watch game development. I'm not streaming as much because we're closing in on the
Mm-hmm.
development, getting close to release. So there's a lot of stuff that I can't really show. But after that, we'll be doing the new stuff. But yes, so
Mm-hmm. And yeah, be sure to come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. Have a great rest of your weekend, and see you next time. And Chris, get back to winning all those Fall Guy crowns.
thank you, everybody.
All right, take care.